Hello and welcome to the Tampering Podcast, part of the Athletic NBA Show Network. I'm Sam Amick, national NBA writer at The Athletic, here with Anthony Slater, Warriors beat writer extraordinaire, and then some, frequently also a scribe who covers the Sacramento Kings, a team that we did not think we'd be talking about here in, what is it now, mid-April. We are going to get into all of the playoff action on this week's Tampering, naturally. But Slater and I both were at Warriors Kings game 2 last night. We're trying to be a little more fresh with the pod in terms of how quickly we drop it. So this particular conversation, I believe, super producer Andrew Schleck said, is coming out quick after we talk. So we're going to start on Warriors Kings and make our way out from there. Tonight's games, we have Hawks Celtics, Boston up 1-0 in that series. Knicks Cavs, our Fred Katz, Knicks beat writer, will hopefully join us later in the pod to talk about Game 2 coming up, the Knicks out front in that series, and then Suns Clippers tonight as well. With the this is up your past life, Slater, the Russell Westbrook Kevin Durant matchup. So we'll get into all that.
Game 1 in that series.
Great game one. But as was the case in that game when Russell Westbrook found his way into some back hall and had an issue with a fan, we are going to start, like I said, with Warriors Kings. So many layers to this matchup. The one that is top of mind because we'll see if we get kind of, screwed, for lack of a better way of putting it, on the timing of the pod if a verdict comes out soon. But the Draymond Green stomp on Domantas Sabonis in that game, is the talk of the night. Draymond has his ankle grabbed, and certainly the video makes that part very, very clear, and then pulls it up, pulls it down. Pretty good amount of force on Sabonis. He's on the floor writhing in pain and taking his time to get up, and Kings are tending to him, and Draymond goes full WWE heel. I mean, he is up screaming with the fans. Don't have to be a master lip reader to figure out a few of the things that he hurled their way. Place is going crazy. You and I were there. The basketball part of this, of course, Kings up 2-0, something we did not see coming. We both picked the Warriors in this series. Man, thoughts from a crazy night for you?
You mentioned Draymond's post ejection, during the review theatrics. One of the funnier parts, and I took a video, I put it up, but he jumps on the bench to really go at the fans that are kind of in the section behind the Warriors bench. And Steve Kerr's just kind of wandering into the huddle. He's got his clipboard and he's kind of waiting for the 5 guys who are going to be on the court to sit down so he can write the names of the guys who are on the court and maybe drop his ATO or whatever he's going to do. And I'm just curious what he's thinking in that moment, because you can even see it in the video. He's sitting there kind of right behind Draymond towards the end, trying to pull this team to a 1-1 tie and absolutely their most crucial moment of the season. He's probably, at that point, I know one of his assistants had told him, he said he didn't see the play, but he's one of the assistants said, hey, he's probably getting tossed. So I'm sure he's sitting there okay, who are we going to put in here?
Right.
But as he's doing that, it's the guy that, as you mentioned, the WWE heel is standing where he's supposed to be talking to his players, flailing his arms in the air, yelling at the fans. And I just wonder, what Steve Kerr's thought right there.
I've had that thought about Steve a lot. And more in the past couple of years, where right about the time you think you can handicap what his real thoughts are, and maybe a time when he's internally rolling his eyes at the Draymond experience and being exhausted by it, he'll come out publicly and convince you otherwise, that no, this is what we need. This is our guy. And he knows both sides of the Draymond experience. I will say that in terms of possible disciplinary action, I wrote that I didn't think Draymond would be suspended. I might be leaning back toward the other direction now that I've unpacked it the next day. The one part I didn't focus enough on in the piece that I wrote was that post-incident scene, right? Because in this day and age when fan interaction is, continues to be an issue for the league, I think it's safe to say the league is not going to be real happy with the way that he handled that energy. Because, of course, the crowd was upset, but there was no specific thing being done to Draymond to warrant, going down that road. It was more so that there was this lull because of Sabonis taking his time and the refs trying to look at it, that it was he just started feeling that negative energy from the crowd. And and
I
didn't want
think
to
he
just
just
take it
wanted to
in.
present a like not a face of concern or
Yeah.
true anger. It was more of like trying to lean into it, which he's done before. He did it out in Memphis last year. Remember whoop that trick? He was like waving the
Yeah. Yeah.
towels to that. It kind of reminded me a little of that. To add the
Most
extra layer to what
problematic
you're talking about.
celebration in the league, but that's an aside. Go ahead.
Yeah. To add to the layer that you're talking about of the league, what does the league think about it? I remember I'm looking out at half court as he's um this is the time he's almost doing like the hand to the ear. Who was that? Isn't that like Hulk Hogan or something? It was like hand to the ear,
Yeah.
like I can't hear you.
Right.
As
Right.
he's
Right.
doing that, I look up for you got Vivek's seat right where the TNT booth is. My eyes peer about 4 rows up, and it's Adam Silver and like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
the group of NBA office people just watching Draymond Green do this
Well,
all.
not
I
only
don't think they were
that,
booing, but
no, I mean, yeah, they had a front row seat to the action. Mike Bass, his top PR man from the league office, was right by his side. Amy Brooks, one of the top NBA executives on the team marketing side. Heavy hitters were in town, and one guy who I don't believe was at the game, and I'll frame this to make sure that it doesn't come out the wrong way. I'm a sucker for context. It is very interesting that the man who will ultimately make this choice is a guy in Joe Dumars, who is not only a former Kings executive, who currently holds the NBA position of executive vice president, head of basketball operations. It's the old job that Kiki Vandeweghe had, where come playoff time, every controversial situation crosses his desk and he decides what to do. Well, Joe is also extremely close with Draymond. As you know, he's one of his mentors, just coming up in that part of the country. Certainly some connective tissue when you talk about the way Draymond plays and Joe being an incredible part of the Bad Boy Pistons. A lot of layers to that, and so man, to be a fly on that in that room and to get some sense from Joe how he sees this and see what he does would be really interesting.
I will let you know from the Warriors side, they were like scoffing at the idea that he would get extra suspension because for a few reasons. They felt number one, it was acknowledged by the referees on the court and the league, whatever, that Domantas Sabonis initiated it. Like, he got a technical foul for the ankle grab. So there was some level of instigation they felt, number one. Two, they felt that he was ejected from a huge game. And there was even people, and I know have talked in retrospect, feeling that maybe in past situations where Draymond was suspended, a lot of that is because in the game itself that it happened. I remember the Steven
Yep.
Adams kick. He wasn't ejected in the moment. He missed, maybe the 6 most important minutes of the series in retrospect. You know what I mean? Like that's a tie game down the stretch. No Draymond Green. I think there was that, and the idea there was a little bit like they felt the theatrics from the King side of like the Domantas Sabonis injury, right? Leak that he's getting the X-rays. He
And everybody's
writhing on
getting
the
X-rays.
on
Draymond
on the
had one on
court.
his ankle, apparently.
Yeah, there was definitely a few people like, well, he didn't seem too hurt in the last 6 minutes when he's hanging
Sure.
on the rim, dunking late, some of
Right.
that. So I just think all of that combined, there was a lot of feeling in the Warriors locker room, like, no way they can suspend him. Well, they may be wrong, but they didn't
No,
think
I
he.
hear you. And there I got some of that last night too. Draymond's camp, it is safe to say, does not anticipate, as of last night, him being suspended. And even Kings people I talked to were probably leaning that direction. So we'll see. I should have mentioned, by the way, it kind of hit me as you were breaking it down. You called this shot, man. We're sitting there on press row. And did you not turn to me and say, yeah, Draymond needs to change the energy here at some point. He's got to shift this thing the other way. I don't think this is what you had in mind, but you did say
Well, yeah, I mean, you never know the exact details of how he's gonna,
that.
light the room on fire. But it reminded me a little. Were you at that Pelicans home game a couple weeks ago? When
No, no, no.
it was a
I'll
big
tell you
game.
that
You
story
probably
in a minute, but I
watched it
wasn't
at
there.
least.
Yeah.
Yeah, where they're down big in a
Yeah.
big home game that felt like, they
Yeah.
lose, they're probably going to the
I was
play-in.
watching.
Yeah. And he just decided, he felt like they were playing terrible, which they were, and he just needed to just like juice everything up. And he teetered on the edge of ejection in that game. And remember there was like a situation under the hoop. They ended up having to review it. He already had one technical for scuffling with Brandon Ingram. He almost gets a second for a scuffle with Herb Jones that was more kind of after the play theatrics. Some people were trying to say he kicked Herb Jones. The referees decided no penalty for that. He stayed in the game. And then they came back and won because, to be honest, like he really did fire up his team. And that you mentioned Steve
Yeah.
Kerr. that was one of those games post game. He's talking about like he's our fire. We need it. We have a lot of skill. We need the heart. We need the roar of Draymond Green. But that's always on the edge. We've had this conversation several times over the years, and I just felt last night I think was very much part of them climbing back in it, right? They're in a good place when he gets ejected, in part because I just think their energy changed. They went smaller, they went more defensive minded. They were good to start that fourth quarter, down 8. And I don't remember what the exact score is when he got tossed, but they're tied in the middle of the quarter.
Right.
Because I think he was trying to do that, lay that same strategy down there. But the problem is when you teeter on the edge, when you're kind of doing some of that type of stuff, maybe to tick off the other team, maybe to just fire yourself up, you might accidentally step too hard on somebody. You know what I mean?
No doubt. Quick side story on that Pelicans game. A little irony there. That particular day, and this is a writing process story that you can certainly relate to. I wanted to write about the Kings clinching a playoff berth finally. And if you remember, a Warriors loss that night would have clinched it for the Kings. I was on about 3 hours sleep from a game the night before. Was desperately hoping the Kings would not clinch that night because I wanted another day to figure out what the hell I was going to write. So I was home watching that Pelicans game and they're down 20 and I'm thinking to myself, man, you're killing me, Warriors. We normally don't care who the hell wins, but selfishly I did that day. So when Draymond turned things around, I was a happy athletic writer and ended up writing the next day.
We should probably discuss like how good the Sacramento Kings are playing. Like
You
that
think?
is
Yeah, you're trying to make sure the Kings Nation doesn't jump on us. Yeah, I mean, give me
well,
your
I mean,
takeaways.
look, they're up 2-0 on the defending champs, and they're the
100%.
team that you mentioned in the lead in. Like, if you before the season you just told them like they get one home play in game, that might have been like, okay, like that's a good step. We'll take that. Like they just like dominated in a lot of ways the Warriors in 2 straight home games, and now look like the clear favorite to advance to the second round where they might get the Lakers. Like this situation is something.
It is bonkers. I'll for the sake of good dialogue and debate here, I'll push back a little bit. I mean, dominated is a little strong. You could flip it the other way and say they looked dominant at times, and then you look up and the Warriors are right there. I don't remember 2 games, you know, like these where both sides can sit there and break it down and find all kinds of things to be hopeful about. You know what I mean? Well, this guy didn't have it going. We'll fix that. But it's in both directions, and you don't get to any clear conclusion. I think in terms of observations and takeaways on the King side, and I did write this, like what blows me away is that when you're talking about poise and composure and competitiveness and grit and cohesion and all those things that matter a lot this time of year, the Kings are not just holding their own, they are winning. And they are, more specifically, since we focus so much on Draymond, a little thing that I found so interesting last night talking to folks on the Kings side. You got all these Warriors ties. Mike Brown, former Warriors coach, Leandro Barbosa, former Warrior, Harrison Barnes, Luke Laux, all the way down the line. And this group knows the Warriors incredibly well, knows Draymond incredibly well. Well, there's clearly like an unofficial edict within their team of do not put gas on the Draymond fire. So they are turning the other cheek. They are playing ball. They are competing. They are trying to do all the little things that lead to playoff victories while also showing what, for Steve Kerr and Mike Brown, one of their mentors, Greg Popovich, had coined the phrase appropriate fear. They drop it all the time. The Kings are showing appropriate fear of the Warriors and their execution and all the things that we didn't think they had because they had no experience together in the postseason. So far, they are showing.
Yeah. The defense last night, the ball pressure, the fact that Davion Mitchell could stay on the floor because he hit some jumpers. And you at one point to me during the game, I think he hit like a mid-ranger early, and you were like, hey, he's been pretty good offensively lately. And I'm like, yeah, but they're still not going to respect the jumper, so it creates the same spacing problem, which makes me skeptical he can stay on the floor. But I think Mike Brown has kind of leaned into like he doesn't always have, you're not seeing much Keegan Murray, who's one of their best floor spacers, because he just doesn't seem ready defensively. And he's played a little bit more Alex Lynn than you'd expect, played more Davion Mitchell, who again, was good on Steph. Did not stop Steph last night, but bothered him enough. And then Malik Monk, it's not just, hey, he's scoring off the bench. It's like a high level energy, picking up full court. He's not some elite defender, but he's just, they're bothering actions. I think they've scouted the Warriors very well because, three of their coaches, you can add Luke Laux and Leandro Barbosa into it, were in the Warriors room. They understand what the Warriors want to do, their pet actions, all that. And even Sabonis, I mean, obviously at times he's getting picked on and brought up, to the level of the screen, but I just think he's trying very hard. And that's the thing. Fox, quick hands. How did the game start? Two of those quick steals. Harrison
Yep,
Barnes, another name. I know we might read a story in The Athletic from Sam Amick about Harrison Barnes in the next
indeed.
couple days. He is bringing some juice. His hands are everywhere. He's guarding well. Two big dunks last night. Like, this isn't just some pretty, 3-point bombs away type team. They went 9 of 32 from three last night, but won because of defense, really.
You hit on something really interesting there. You mentioned Keegan Murray, 15 minutes in the first game, 16 in the second, and you're dead on about why that has been the case. Because Mike Brown, and I think you got to tip your hat to him in this regard, knows playoff basketball, and he knows the type of two-way toughness it takes to win these games, even with a team that has been bad defensively all year long. If I was Keegan and I'm looking for kind of an inspiration right now, or somebody whose example I should follow, I would look to their, the one they like to call the Red Velvet, or whatever the hell they call Kevin Herter. Herter gets out there, his shot's not falling. I think at one point he was 0 for 9 for the series, midway through game 2 on threes. And that's obviously his scoring, his range is what he's known for. But he has 2 blocks early, couple boards, defensively scrapping, fighting, doing just enough to not lose Mike Brown's faith, to stay in the game. And then eventually the shots start falling. The Davion thing, I wrote after game 1, some of my skepticism that while I admire De'Aaron Fox's willingness to chase Steph Curry all night long, it feels like a losing battle over the course of an entire series because of De'Aaron's load offensively. And so, plenty of that in game 2, De'Aaron getting after it defensively, but Davion Mitchell on a playoff stage, because he does seem to be pretty composed, pretty confident, pretty tough. Like, that's how you survive some of the Steph Curry minutes, is applying that pressure. And Mike so far is getting the best of the coaching matchup.
Yeah, for sure. And, we could flip it to the Warriors side of things. They go back to San Francisco. They're down 2-0. They need to solve some rotational trouble that they're having. I mean, last night, they are to the point. Jordan Poole, who, by the way, Klay Thompson said at postgame, I believe he said, Poole's like, I think he said he was like playing on one leg, which seems like it's a little of an exaggeration. But Jordan Poole sprained his left ankle in game 1, was questionable. He played all 82 games this season. He usually really pushes through if he can, but it was very much a question mark. I saw him pregame, like, with a long meeting with Rick Celebrini. Almost looked like he was trying to convince Rick Celebrini he was good to go, but he does not look like himself offensively. I think he was limited to like 15, 16 minutes last night, like 1 of 7. He had that one pass where he just chucked it in the crowd. He just didn't look comfortable.
Right.
So he's kind of been minimized from the rotation. Andrew Wiggins starts last night. You didn't see much Dante DiVincenzo. None of those two in the fourth quarter. No Jonathan Kuminga in the second half at all. He only plays 4 minutes. Kerr basically, trims it down really in the fourth to like kind of like a 7-man rotation. You're still going to play Looney with the starters, but Moses Moody suddenly showed up. Like, Steve Kerr searching. I mean, you mentioned the coaching, like who's winning the coaching battle right now. I mean, one guy, and this is usually happens when the team wins, but one guy looks very secure in his rotation decisions right now. Like, even Alex Lynn, who before the series, if you told me they're playing Alex Lynn, I'm like, what is Mike Brown doing?
Right.
It's working. They're
He's
plus,
made an
I don't know what
impact,
the exact
man.
number
He's
is.
been pretty good.
Yeah, he's been pretty good. I think Mike Brown smartly has only played Alex Lynn really in the non-Curry minutes. It's much easier to survive against the Warriors with the backup big if he does not have to face the Steph Curry action, right? But on the other side, yeah, like Steve Kerr's like, Moses Moody, dust off the cobwebs. You're playing in the fourth quarter of this
Right.
huge game. So,
Right.
yeah, the Warriors are on their heels. The Kings have knocked them back. That's a surprise to many. I think pretty much 95% of the series predictions I saw were Warriors in 6. For those to come true, they would have to sweep the next 4.
Right. I don't think, I mean, honestly, people who pick the Kings, Bobby Marks, friend and colleague from ESPN, picked the Kings. He comes to mind. I don't know that I saw anybody else other than, maybe folks in Sacramento talking about it. Did anybody come to mind for you, prediction wise?
That pick Kings.
Correct.
Um, no,
Oh,
not that I can
Andrew
remember. I
says
mean,
Zach Harper did. How many games, Andrew? Look at our Zach Harper out in front from Sacramento, by the way. He's a homer.
in six.
Wow. There you go.
Yeah, and look, this is a lot about the Kings, but it's also a lot about the Warriors. Like these were bad habits built over a bad season by them. They were high in turnovers, they were tops in the league in fouls, they couldn't close games on the road, and obviously everybody knows their road record. It was 11-30. Well, now they're 0-2 on the road. They didn't close either game. De'Aaron Fox lit them up down the stretch because De'Aaron Fox this season proved to be a great player in the clutch, and the Warriors couldn't close games on the road. And guess what the Warriors did last night? 22 turnovers, 26 fouls. This is who they were all season. Where a lot, if we were just not judging the Warriors on their history and judging them on the season, then these two games kind of make sense, right? They're the lower seed, they're on the road, all their flaws showed up
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
we'd
Yeah.
seen all season.
In a moment, we're going to take a break and bring our guy Fred Katz on to talk Knicks Cavs. But I do want to finish on the Warriors Kings front here, Slater. I know it's early. We're not sending the Warriors off to pasture by any means in this series, but I do wonder your perspective on the general idea that the Warriors go into Game 3, knowing in terms of the greater stakes here that, like we've written about all season long, talked about all season long, you have this potential last dance component to what they are experiencing right now. I know Steve has pushed back on it, but with Draymond's contract decision coming up, some other stuff like
Bob
if they get
Myers.
Bob Myers' uncertain future, if they get bounced in the first round by the once lowly Sacramento Kings, there is going to be some tough conversations with Joe Lacob and that group when it comes to paying that luxury tax bill. How do you see that?
Yeah, and I've said this all along, all season. Is people, I think want answers in March, answers in February. What's going to happen after the season? It's a lot of it has been let's see how it ends. If it ends in another NBA championship, they're probably bringing it all back together. Even if it ends in the West Finals, second round in a deep series against the Suns, where they look like a legit contender still. Well, Joe Lacob will pay for a legit contender. But I was watching Joe Lacob, sporadically last night. He's sitting baseline both of these first two games, and they have him right next to this legend section of Kings. During Game 1, he's sitting next to Bobby Jackson. Jason Williams was over there yesterday. He was sitting next to Vladi and Peja Stojakovic, and I don't want to say pouting, but he's over there. He's just doing his Joe Lacob like stewing. He can't help himself. He's watching his team lose, and he's huffing and puffing. And I just think them going down easily to the Kings in the first round, and we have no idea where this is going. But if it goes that way, if it's like a 5-game series or something like that, and then he's staring into the offseason at Klay Thompson handout, wondering if he can get a max, Draymond Green trying to figure out his future and a future that he wants to be highly paid with the Warriors. Bob Myers is kind of looking around, and Joe Lacob saying, I only got 2 home games, let's say maybe 3. Didn't get much money with the playoff gate that they rely on. The tax bills going insane next year, and oh, by the way, the new CBA is going to penalize us X amount more in all these different ways if we have this type of tax bill. I think that very much makes him more skeptical on holding it together from a financial standpoint, which means I think various heads, I don't know if you want to say heads will roll, but I just think it looks much different if they go down easily to the Kings than if they respond the next 2 games, win the series, get to the West Finals at least, and look like they
Yeah.
can. Everyone can convince each other, hey, we could make a run next year.
No, Slater. My final point there would just be that I think Bob Myers is ready to get back to Chase Center, regardless of the big picture. I assume you saw this video of the cowbell getting rung in his ear in like violent fashion for a long time.
Violent fashion and pretty good poker face, whatever you want to call it, from Bob Myers, did not flinch as it is just getting rattled. And it was like right ear, right ear, right ear. Okay, he's not responding. Let's go left ear, left ear, left ear.
Good composure. I mean, you were there the night that I had a guy yelling at me in the OKC Game 6 Warriors game back in the day. and I turned around and we had words. Bob's a better man than me. That would have
Sam
been
Amick
tough to
would have
take.
boiled over like a teapot if
Like
Sam,
a
that was
started
actually your
over.
neighbor ringing
Could have
that
been.
cowbell.
No, fine. You want Fred, first of all, you jump on. We don't get to introduce you. You're here. We're going to take a break in a second. But now I'm going to give you everything behind the scenes of tampering. I just had to jump off the pod. True story, because neighbor John, who's a big Kings fan, who last night decided to go to the Kings game with his father. Actually, very cool. His dad had never been to the arena. They go to the game. They have a great time. And he picks impeccable timing as we do the pod to literally walk to the front window of my home and instigate my dog with his light the beam King's sword. And the dog starts barking. And that's what the hell I'm dealing with here in Sacramento.
Well,
So, my
honestly,
God.
you know what? He should be that. Kings fans should be doing whatever the hell they want right now. They should just be so happy, constantly celebrating. And if that means ruining Sam Amick's life, then that's just what you have to do. That's the reason we have Sam Amico. You can ruin Sam Amick,
wow,
you get
holy
Amico,
smokes,
and you're
we're
fine.
getting personal.
It's the same,
and then
the
he
same
proceeds
thing.
to instantly text me and say, instigating like Draymond Green. So there it is. All right, we are going to take a break. Fred, I know we've been West Coast heavy on this series or on this pod, but you got a good little series back east. So we're going to talk Knicks Cavs when we get back.
Today's show is brought to you by Indeed. Visit Indeed.com/NBA Show 22 to start hiring now. When you're drafting your fantasy team, you ever wish you could handpick the best stars for your business team? If you're building your talent roster, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills when you can do it all with Indeed. Find top talent fast with Indeed's suite of powerful hiring tools like matching, assessments, and virtual interviews. If you hate waiting, Indeed just makes hiring easy. You can do it all in one place. With Indeed, matching as soon as you sponsor a post, you get a short list of quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your job description. Boom! Hiring at warp speed. Indeed knows when you're growing your own business, you have to make every dollar count. That's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. Visit Indeed.com/NBA Show 22 to start hiring now. Just go to Indeed.com/NBA Show 22. Indeed.com/NBA Show 22. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
All right, gentlemen, we are back. The entire band back together. Fred had to do the most important parts of his job this morning, providing top level Knicks coverage for all the Athletic subscribers. Fred, I hope those interviews went well. Look forward, as always, to your latest work. You got a game 2 coming up tonight. Your Knicks take the opener. Your Knicks have Julius Randle talking about bands being back together. Jalen Brunson, the whole gang. Tom Thibodeau, who, by the way, out of respect, we should share. If you haven't seen the Athletics anonymous player poll that was published today, talk about a heck of a kind of dichotomy. Tom Thibodeau has his team playing well in the first round of the playoffs. I think probably will get some second level coach of the year votes, has done a great job this season. But according to NBA players everywhere, the 108 who we talked to for the poll, like far and away the coach you would least like to play for. But Freddie's doing something right. And these Knicks are in a good spot. What are you seeing?
Well, Tibbs is a maniac. I think Tibbs will be the first person to tell you that. This is a direct quote from Tibbs. Winning is more fun than fun is fun. That is an exact Tibbs quote. It's an amazing quote. And it's so on brand, but it makes sense. Look, part of putting this team together and part of the reason that they're good is because they've made a conscious effort to go get guys who are Tibbs guys. They traded for Josh Hart knowing that, how they say, oh, that she's a mother and she just doesn't have a child yet. Josh Hart was a Tibbs guy and he just didn't have Tibbs yet. Like everybody knew that Josh Hart would just fit in perfectly. And those are the types of personalities, those sorts of gritty, play hard, try hard guys that they've tried to put together. Quentin Grimes likes playing for Tibbs because he likes playing for a really hard playing coach. And the most important one is Jalen Brunson, who, one of the big reasons that Brunson signed with the Knicks was because he wanted to play for Tibbs, because his dad played for Tibbs when Tibbs was an assistant coach with the Knicks in the 90s and early 2000s. And Jalen Brunson has known Tibbs since he was like literally 5 years old and wanted to play for him. And Brunson is a very Tibbsy sort of guy in that he'll be unable to walk and still do whatever he can to try to take a charge. So they've put together a lot of those personalities. They're really gritty. They play really hard. I thought it was really telling that basically all of the Cavaliers post-game comments after game one were, well, they came out really physical. We didn't realize you could be so physical and be able to get away with it. We have to be more physical in game two. It's like, that's what the Knicks are. And that's what the playoffs are. And you mesh those two together and if they're going to win, it's because they're trying to beat the crap out of you on both sides. They just play a really physical brand of ball.
What did you see from Randall with that ankle injury in mind? He's 7 of 20 from the field, 19 points, 10 boards, 4 assists, -8 overall. Been out for a quick minute. What did you see there?
He definitely didn't look like all the way like himself. I mean, there's no question about that. He came out firing. He had a really good first half. He had 16 in the first half, which was great for them because Brunson was in foul trouble and only played 9 minutes in the first half. And they really needed that offense on a day where they weren't scoring. They weren't getting anything out of Quickly. They weren't getting anything out of RJ Barrett. And Randall stepped up in the first half. He only had 3 in the second half. I didn't think his defense was fantastic. When I go back and rewatch the game, there were a number of plays where, especially in the third and fourth quarter, where the Cavs put Randall in a pick and roll, and Randall actually goes to the right place, but his hands are just at his side. So Mitchell pops a pull-up 3 or something like that. And that happened a couple of times in the second half. I didn't think he was, dominant or anything like that, but there's no question that his presence helped. He came up with a huge offensive rebound at the end of the game to seal it. And for him, he says it's not a pain tolerance thing anymore. He says the ankle's fine. It's just conditioning. You could see that. Like, they pulled him less than 5 minutes into the game, which is a very weird rotation. Randall's like known for going off in first quarters, and often he plays the whole period. So he's got to kind of get his conditioning back. And I imagine once he does that, we might start to see the Julius Randle we're used to.
101-97, low scoring. What generally did you take away from the game? Was that, like, obviously it's great for the Knicks to go on the road and steal game one. Did that spell to you like, oh, the Knicks have complete control of the series, or do you just think this is going to be one of those slugfest, doesn't matter what arena it's in, it could go either way any night?
Isn't it fun that like the Knicks Cavs and the Kings Warriors are I think definitely the 2 best first round series in the league. And
Clippers Suns has an argument.
Clippers Suns has an argument, but I would genuinely put those two.
Slater, we don't have any writers from those teams on this pod. Fred is trying to elevate.
Yeah, I'm saying we're like uniquely qualified to cover the 2 best series between the 3 of us.
Actually, we're uniquely qualified to cover Suns Clippers. We got everything. We got all this history with the OKC guys. We're good there too.
There you go. I grew up a Clippers fan. I can talk your ear off about that 05-06.
I always forget that part. That's such a
I grew up a Clippers fan. I got one good year. The 05-06 Clippers. They came 1 game away from the Western Conference Finals, lost to the Suns. It's a very depressing game. One of the weird parts of this job is like you grow up and there's still a little kid in you, and I don't root for the Clippers at all anymore. But Elton Brand was my favorite childhood player. And like, just like talking about that 05-06 Clippers team and that Sun series with Elton Brand at different points in my job it's just like, wow, 12-year-old Fred would really be enjoying this. But anyway,
your new nickname is East Coast Bomber. That's who you are.
If only I could spend like East Coast Bomber.
Real quick, anyway, Fred, let me dive in. We talked so much about Warriors Kings crowd in Sacramento. I'm just wondering what it was like in Cleveland. I mean, they have not done this without LeBron. It's a pretty amped up group in general. I like their crowd when they're not, the Miami reunion.
Just quickly before he answers that, the whole like they haven't done it without LeBron thing, I always think is like, it's so weird how much it's like, okay, the Spurs didn't do it without Tim Duncan for 25 years or whatever. Like LeBron.
Are you defensive for Larry Nance Sr.?
Well, I just it's comparative to the Kings drought because it's like this. Oh, without LeBron, like
it's an identity.
James, you had him for X amount of years. Like, yeah, those were your glory years. Like, I don't know. It counts.
I agree with Slater. I'm about to make I actually completely agree with you, and I'm about to call your somewhat hot take. and raise you to a very hot take since Sam asked about the crowd.
Is this all in defense of Brad Dougherty?
He's about
No,
to
this
cook the
is-
crowd. I
No,
can't
this
wait
is
for
this is gonna piss off people. There is
Yes.
no arena in the, you know us. We travel a lot. We've been to every arena in the league. We've watched basketball games at every arena in the league. There is no arena in which I enjoy watching a basketball game less than Cleveland. It is
The seat is not very good, but the seat's
well,
not good in MSG.
that's not even what I'm talking about.
Fred's
The-
getting personal. What are we talking about?
The PA is so unnecessarily
yeah.
loud.
Yeah.
The crowd sound that they pump in is
Yeah,
so
that's true.
unnecessarily loud.
That's true.
Cleveland's a great sports town. Like they have great
Philly
fans
has
across
this
the
problem
board.
too.
Yeah, they have great fans across the board. I love it when a crowd gets loud as hell. That Kings environment is crazy. MSG is fun. Like crowd should get as loud as it wants. That's fun. When you're just like pumping in, when guys are walking up the court and it's so loud that you can't even have a conversation with the person sitting next to you, that is not an enjoyable experience. And I cannot stand watching a game in Cleveland because it actually hurts my ears. Slater, I will say, you know, one of the things I was going to relate to the Kings, to the question that you asked, one of the things that I think is interesting with Knicks Cavs is I think it's going to come down to the same thing that we've seen Kings Warriors come down to, which is that like, I think whoever wins the possession game in this series is going to win the series. And that's ultimately what it's going to be. You know, we've seen the Warriors just like, they don't have enough to make up for the fact that they're getting killed in the possession game. They're turning it over on 18% of their possessions, which is inexcusably high if you're not going to have like, you know, peak Steph Curry, peak Klay Thompson to make up for it. And the Kings are getting 37% of available offensive rebound attempts.
By the way, the Kings, not even a good offensive rebounding team, are
Yeah.
killing the Warriors on the glass.
Yeah. And they're annihilating them. Like they're not just 37% is not just a lot. Like that would be
Alex
by
Len, baby.
far, that'd be by far the most in the league. Like that might be the most of all time if that were belong to a team. Like that's just, you cannot win a game if you're turning it over 18% of your possessions and then you're giving it back when you make them miss on 37% of those possessions. You can't win games like that if they're going to be close. Like that's what determines it. And I think with the Knicks and Cavs, we're going to see the same thing. And to me, the ultimate battle is going to be, can Cleveland, which plays with two bigs in Mobley and Allen, and is so good as a rim protection team, and so people think of them as this kind of big, brawny team, can Cleveland keep the Knicks off the offensive glass? Because Cleveland isn't actually a great defensive rebounding team. You can push Mobley around, and the Knicks did that in game one. And if Allen played a ton of minutes, they played their four really good players a ton of minutes in game one. But if Allen sits, the Knicks have an opportunity to just crush the offensive glass. I talked about how the Kings over the first two games have gotten 37% of possible offensive rebounds. Well, the Knicks got 42% of possible offensive rebounds. 42% of the time that they missed a shot in game one, they got a second chance opportunity, which is just a crazy number. We'll see what happens with Josh Hart's health moving forward, because he was a big part of that. He had 5 offensive boards. But the Knicks all year, their offense has been dependent on winning the possession game, not turning it over and getting offensive boards. And I think that's going to be huge in this series.
Gentlemen, very, very good stuff. I do think we should attempt to make the rounds because its first round is obviously there's so much action going on. We can't cover all of it, but I do want to try to jump to some of the other series, and I am going to try to get your quick thoughts on let's go to Lakers Grizzlies. That game is coming up this evening, I believe. Is that correct? Accurate?
I don't know.
No, I'm sorry.
don't know.
That's tomorrow.
think
Yeah. All right. Party fell there. All right. That's tomorrow night, which is fine. The John Morant x-rays came back. No broken bones, a lot of pain. His messaging post game after game one made you feel like he was out for quite some time. We'll see if he plays in game two. These Lakers that Fred tried to keep him down, told me I couldn't even talk about him for the entire season. I mean, I had to pay hard-earned money that The Athletic is nice enough to give me into a swear jar if I talked about the Lakers. What do you say now, Fred? Look at these Lakers. They're scaring the Grizzlies. Here they come.
You want to hear even worse, Sam? I did like picks predictions with a friend, and I picked the Lakers before the
Hey,
series.
look at that.
That's how terrible I've got.
That's growth. That's maturity.
That's true. I mean, look, I think Memphis not having Steven Adams just stands out so much to me, because when their half court offense bogs down, the thing that saves them is, man, I'm just hitting the same notes on this podcast over and over, which is Steven Adams. If he is on the floor, you are going to be the best offensive rebounding team in the NBA. Like, that is just how, that is the level of offensive rebounder Steven Adams has gotten. And when that half court offense bogs down, being able to have all of those extra bites at the apple is really great for a team like Memphis, especially when you have some shooters who can really stroke it, like Desmond Bane, and you kick back out to Jackson, that kind of stuff. And offensive rebounds can be great extra opportunities for threes. And man, I just think not having Steven Adams is, because he's not one of the main three guys. I think not having Steven Adams has been a little bit overlooked for them. Brandon Clark too, another one of their huge offensive rebounders. I think that's a thing that really worries me.
No, it's huge. It's huge. And the Lakers' depth. And I mean, I said to someone the other day that, the Rob Pelinka praise is something that we haven't anticipated. But he had a hell of a deadline, better late than never, adding depth to this team. And Hachimura's out there having big games, and LeBron and AD don't have to be supermen to, for them to win. And the defensive identity is definitely something that is playoff convenient, if you will. But let me frame it this way, because we're not going to do, dive in deep.
I have
on
quick
each
thoughts
series.
on the Grizzlies.
Yeah, I was going to say, but
you
favorite,
mentioned
go ahead.
Pelinka having a good deadline. I just think the Grizzlies had a bad summer. They gave up they let Kyle Anderson go. They traded DeAnthony Melton. Obviously now they don't have Clark or Adams. And I was talking to Warriors people yesterday about the series, and they're like, yeah, they were dangerous against us without Ja. When Ja went out, they still were a big threat, but it was like, yeah, but they went big with Adams and Clark, and they had DeAnthony Melton, they had Kyle Anderson. That's suddenly like, Santi Aldama, David Roddy. Like, I just think at a time when you felt like they were ready to speed into contention, I don't think they put the throttle down. Go ahead, Sam.
No, I agree. Well, you already kind of answered. I was just going to just say, give me one major takeaway from each of these series, and that's a very good big picture one.
Austin Rivers is going to get money this summer. There's my
Rivers or Reeves there. Don't be giving money to the wrong
Austin
person.
Rivers is not going to get paid. Austin Reeves is going to get paid this summer.
I don't think it was Austin Rivers screaming, "I am him."
I think Austin Rivers has done that before. Like,
yeah,
he might have a big three in his series.
Yeah. Austin Rivers does that every morning when he gets up and looks in the mirror. Absolutely.
I mean, I'm so intrigued to see what the Grizzlies do defensively if Rui keeps hitting jumpers, because it's very clear that their defensive strategy was, we're helping off Rui. We're taking away the paint. We're going into the lane. And if Rui hits threes, so be it. And he hit threes like crazy. What did he shoot in that game? He was 5 for 6 from deep and 11 for 14 in the game. And I'll tell you what, when the Wizards made the playoffs in 2021, a team that absolutely nobody remembers that made the playoffs except for me, they played Philadelphia in the first round. And I think even Philadelphia forgets that the 2021 Wizards made the playoffs. They were the 8th seed. They were 34-38, and they got eliminated in the first round. And when the Wizards came away from that series, the first reaction, I would say, from that entire organization was, hey, at least Rui looked really good in the playoffs. Rui had some really strong games. He had a big game 4, I think it was, against Philadelphia when they had a win. He looked really comfortable with the speed of the game. Philly, that was a huge team, and the Wizards were undersized and under-talented and all those things. But Rui started to play a little bit more physical. And that's all I was thinking about when I was watching him go for 29 the other night. And I was like, man, like, I don't know. There's something that, like, the Wizards we're talking about how calm he was, how composed he was, and how good he looked as a young player. And now I'm like, hey, he did it again.
No, he looked good. And I was going to say it takes all kinds. And I do sometimes mostly enjoy the Grizzlies leaning into their own little heel act, but I do question, Desmond Bane post game, like, they just can't, none of those guys can help themselves but to consistently jab, be irritants, with their messaging, with their talking points, with how they carry themselves on the court. And Desmond talking about Rui, I mean, he just was throwing shade left and right. He goes, well, I'm paraphrasing, but he had the best game of his life, and we'll see if he can do it again. And, that was their game plan. And not that it's like, oh, you're going to wake up Rui. But it's just a strange way to frame it when your team is in a tricky spot.
I get it though, Sam. Like I get that, but at the same time, like I get what you're talking about from an optics perspective, but at the same time, like he's right. Like Rui shot 32% from three this year. He's okay from the corners. He hit a few of those threes from the wings where he's normally not good. Like you can't take away everything. And when you're playing against the team that has LeBron and AD, you have to try to take away the paint. And that's what Memphis really wanted to do first and foremost. So I think they're going to keep giving Rui those shots. Like, I don't think just because he had a big game, all of a sudden they're closing out hard on Rui. I think they're going to keep giving him those shots. And this series is like one of the many things that could come down to is like, is he going to hit them? Is Troy Brown going to hit them? Like they're going to help off of those guys.
All right, I'm gonna the other two series tonight because I had my scheduling wrong. You know, Hawks Celtics. I think we're gonna skip over that one. It looks like Atlanta is overmatched, not surprisingly. We'll see if they get one tonight. Suns Clippers. Belief level quickly from each of you guys on whether or not the Clippers can actually get this job done. It's only one game, but man, you know the quintessential Russell Westbrook game, 3 of 19 shooting. But hustle all over the place. Some incredible defensive plays late. Ty Lue trying his best and so far with some success to absolutely support Russ and kind of find that vibe and that dynamic that Russ never got with the Lakers. And they get the job done. But Kawhi with no Paul George and these Suns losing their first game since they shared a court with Kevin Durant was pretty stunning. What do we think happens next year?
If I showed you guys that film and we're like, what are your takeaways? Like you'd never seen Russell Westbrook or any play before. Be like, that's a top 10 defensive guard of all time. Like
I know.
That guy's unbelievable on the defense.
Right.
I mean, he was deflecting everything. He was getting up into Durant. How many like behind the back? Sometimes it was just deflections out of bounds, but it was like bothering KD. Guarding really well. How about the isolation on Devin Booker with the game on the line?
Yeah,
he's blocking Devin Booker's shot and
throwing it off of him
ref,
as he
like
goes
what happened here.
bounds.
Throwing it off of him out of bounds.
Yeah.
Like these were elite defensive plays. And it's just, we all know who Russell Westbrook has been as a defender over the course of his career. But he also then will remind you on random nights, like, oh, those capabilities are in there. And like, sure, I think the Clippers have a chance in this series if that's the defensive Russell Westbrook they're going to get. Like, can you just put him on ISO and against Devin Booker and he's like getting stops like that? But I'm skeptical that you're getting that for a full 7-game series. And I'm also a little bit skeptical on how fresh Kawhi Leonard will look over the course of a series. They had 6 days off going in. Kawhi Leonard, has shown over the course of this season, even the last few, I guess since his injury, if he has a lot of time off, he looks good. He looks fresh. As the games start to pile up a little bit more, he looks a little bit stiffer, not as good.
Fred, do you think, because you guys both covered Russ extensively on a daily basis, he was part of your life, has the statute of limitations expired on the Kevin Durant motivation subplot here? Because there was a time not so long ago when we would all be here for the Kevin Durant versus Russell Westbrook playoff series, but things have changed since then. Kevin has ascended, Russ has declined, but they still have a whole lot of history together.
Yeah. I think he stopped. He definitely cared a whole ton about that in like 2017. He cared so much about that in 2017, even though he said that he didn't care at all. Now, I mean, from afar, I think Law Murray might be a better person to ask about this, or maybe even Jovan, because he's been around him more the last couple of years than I have, obviously. But it doesn't seem to me, and I'm still like in touch with people who are close to Russ and Russ's circle. Like it doesn't seem to me like that's a thing that he cares about all too much. I think the main thing driving Russ now, from everything that I'm told, and honestly from things that he says too, are just like proving everybody wrong about how it went down with the Lakers, proving everybody wrong about saying that he's finished. And I think that's really what's driving him, because knowing Russ, he's always got to prove something or someone wrong. That is his thing. That is where he gets the chip on his shoulder. And I think that's the thing that's kind of pushing him right now.
I think the feelings not only with Russ, but just like the Thunder and KD have thawed over the years. I mean, that's time. That's also KD's now on his 4th jersey. Westbrook has gone Houston, Washington, Lakers, Clippers. Like I would agree with Fred. I don't think I think he lights up when he's facing KD, but it's more just like it's a stage. He can, kind of put the talent on display against KD more than like, oh, I'm still burning that you left in
Yeah,
16.
I think he would care more if he played like the Lakers in the playoffs. I think that would be a thing. I think he'd probably want to show them here's what you're missing out on. But hey, look, we're trying to get into Russell Westbrook's head. I have spent years of my life trying to get into Russell Westbrook's head. I promise.
I'm sorry,
It's
Fred.
not an easy game to play. So
Gotta be in a good
someone
place right
who
now
knows
after
Russ
that
is going to
game
listen to
one.
this and tell Russ that we're saying all this. And Russ is going to be like, how do you know what I'm thinking? So I'm just going to say right now, I have no idea. I don't know what he's thinking. That man is an enigma.
You know what we should do next? We should all wonder what Kevin Durant is thinking. He loves when we
Oh,
do
he
that.
does. He does. He does. He loves that a lot. Might slide into the DMs. I would like to again another series that we'll monitor later because it has been one-sided so far is the Nuggets taking care of business against Minnesota. The Tim Conley reunion matchup.
I
Former
hope you
Nuggets
got takes,
GM.
Emmett, because I don't got any deep takes.
No, I don't.
except
We're
the
moving
Nuggets
on.
are gonna win
I'm
the
giving
series.
results for any of the casuals who listen to the pod. Who didn't
Casuals.
know.
You hear this, Brad?
Sorry, I'm throwing shade here. We take all fans, casuals included. Nuggets 1-0. They were dominant. They looked like number 1 seed. Jamal Murray looked great. But we'll see if the T-Wolves counter there. I do want your thoughts, and this will be the end of our fantastic discussion here. Bucks Heat. So Giannis, it's looking good for him to play in game 2. There was an optimistic report from Mike Budenholzer about his tailbone or back or whatever it was, that brutal fall he took on the Kevin Love charge attempt. But beyond Giannis, like with that context in mind, how do you guys see the danger level for this team that, oh, by the way, I mentioned earlier that we did the anonymous NBA player poll. And one of the questions was, which team other than your own has the best shot at winning the title? The Bucks were the overwhelming winner. I don't remember the percentage, but it was not even close. For them to drop game 1 got my attention. For them to drop it to Miami, if I'm in their shoes, man, I'm having some PTSD to the old bubble days because, and I saw it up close, what the Heat did to Giannis and the Bucks in the bubble was the type of stuff that almost nearly kind of derailed their championship path. They were in a bad way after that, man. Giannis recently told the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel that around that time that he even considered walking away from the game. And I remember being in the
I feel
bubble.
like that's a lie by Giannis. Can you imagine Giannis right now? Just like, what's he doing?
Giannis does.
Quits
And
the NBA because he lost to the Heat. I don't see that one.
I hear you. He is a little tricky to nail down when it comes to if there's exaggerations happening, but there's truth in there because in the bubble there was chatter, like without question, about how like Giannis is not enjoying this experience, not just on the court, like the life experience in the bubble, the stress, the environment.
I don't think any of us were enjoying 2020 too much.
Fair, and I hear you, but it was, they had their own little ecosystem. But I'll never forget sitting with Jimmy Butler in the bubble. And you guys remember the subplot about how Jimmy was going crazy and they couldn't stop Jimmy and Giannis didn't guard him. And then this is back when we used to question Giannis on the regular because he hadn't made that final push, to be a championship player yet and show, who he was on the biggest stage. And it was a little curious that Giannis hadn't guarded Jimmy. And so in terms of the mental side of the game, I do think the Heat, I don't think the Bucks are not afraid of the Heat, but the Heat have a lot of confidence against the Bucks. Now they lose Tyler Hero. That's a massive loss. So overall, how are you seeing this series?
Confidence only takes you so far, Sam. It only takes you so far.
I'll go quick. I think Bucks in 5 or 6. I think they're going to win this series. I don't like the Heat that much this season. I think that you mentioned the Tyler Hero injury. That's their score. They have trouble scoring. Well, Tyler Hero's out now. I think as long as you guarantee me Giannis is back and playing, I think they win the series easily. One thing to add to what you're saying, which you're correct, the Heat was a house of horrors for them in the bubble. They swept the Heat the next series and then went on to win the title. So I kind of feel like they've slayed that dragon. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm taking Bucks in 5 or 6.
I mean, the Heat were one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in the league during the regular season. And they are one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in the playoffs. and they shot 15 of 25 from three. That's 60%. That's not keeping up. They shot 59% on twos. Every single player who played in the game shot at least 50% from the field for Miami. Every single player who took a three for Miami shot at least 50% from three, except for Jimmy Butler, who was spectacular, had 35 points and just went 0 for 1 from three. I don't see it keeping up. Miami's two biggest problems are that, number one, they don't really have enough ball creation, which is really going to just kill them when they don't have Tyler Hero for the rest of the series. Like, Jimmy's going to have to do everything. Bam is going to have to open himself up as a passer even more. And when Bam is a great passer, but when they run the offense through him, like through the high post and that kind of stuff, they just don't necessarily get great shots, as great as of a passer and facilitator as he is. Kyle Lowry can have huge games, but he can, like you saw in the play-in, but he can go absent. I don't see where the creation is going to come from without Hero. And the other thing that I think will hurt them is that they just don't have that many guys who are average or better on both sides of the ball. Like, they have a lot of exploitable players beyond Bam and Jimmy. And that's why, like, someone like Caleb Martin is so important to them, because he can guard at a solid level and he can shoot at a solid level. He's a good cutter. He's active, all those sorts of things. Like, you're not going to play Caleb Martin off the floor. Miami, I think Milwaukee, whether they have Giannis or not, is going to take advantage of those flaws and will be fine. Even if Giannis isn't good to go for the rest of the series. I'm not worried about it. I don't see them shooting like that again. I
like it. Gentlemen, we don't have anybody who's average on this pod. Well done. As always, I highly encourage the listeners who stuck with us to the end of the pod this week to check out that anonymous NBA player poll, and a hearty thanks to our entire staff. Everybody worked their butts off to track down players. I think it was 108 total. At the risk of being braggadocious for the group, it's not easy to get that sort of insight from a quarter of the NBA. And it's a pretty unique project that we hadn't done for a couple years, and I think everybody's proud of. So go check that out at theathletic.com. If you're not subscribed, come on, join us, join the party. Thank you for listening. We will be back next week. Thank you, gentlemen.